The story of the wise and foolish bridesmaids never sat well with me. I always thought the wise ones were kind of mean and snooty about not sharing their lamp oil with the foolish ones. "Run to the store and get your own. There's not enough for all of us," they snap, chewing their gum all sassy. Knowing full well that the lamp shop is closed at midnight, which is when they see the bridegroom coming over the hill to meet them. So the foolish bridesmaids run off and miss out, racing the next morning to the banquet hall and arriving so late that the gate's been shut and they've been barred from entering. The groom himself comes to the door, looks out and says, "I don't know you." I guess I just always felt sorry for the foolish gals who were humiliated at midnight and then banned from the party at dawn. And because this is really about the kingdom of heaven, they're actually getting shut out of eternal partying. My sympathy for the foolish bridesmaids probably stems from the fact that I myself am a bit of a screw-up when it comes to preparedness and time management. Catch me most Saturdays at 4 p.m. when a sermon is due, and you will see a man unhinged. But my most famous instance of tardiness occurred one Halloween 25 years ago. I was living in San Francisco, and I had this great idea for a costume: the Virgin of Guadalupe. Complete with battery-operated lights punctured through a large painted cardboard box that served as her aureole, a deep blue shawl painted with gold stars, and a cardboard crescent moon with a little clay angel head at my feet. But I was still putting the costume together on the night of October 31st. And I did not finish it until 1 a.m. November 1st. As I ran out the front door in my outfit, I phoned my friends who were already going home after a night of parties and drinking. I begged them to meet me for just a little while so they could see my costume and we could have one drink together. They agreed, but it was kind of sad. We stopped briefly at a party where people kept slurring at me, "Where were you when the costume contest happened? You would have won." My friends were tired, so we wound up at a local bar for a quick drink, and I was angry and upset at not being prepared for the night's partying, just like the foolish bridesmaids. Now, I don't think we're supposed to feel sorry for the foolish bridesmaids. The actual message in this story is that we'd better be prepared ourselves for the arrival of the bridegroom, Jesus Christ, and to have our oil at the ready, good works and righteousness, when the time comes and he returns to initiate the reign of the kingdom of heaven. "Keep awake, therefore," it says, "for you know neither the day nor the hour." Yet every time we read this passage, I am pulled in by its undertow of sadness and fear. What if we're not ready? So the setting of this story would have been familiar to Matthew's audience. Unlike today, where the bride and her family carry the weight of expenses and planning, betrothal ceremonies in Jesus' time were mainly the groom's responsibility. First, he had to build a house next to his father's, prepare it to receive the bride, then travel to her parents' place and bring her back to their new home. Only then would the big wedding feast begin, and it would last for 7 days. Also, unlike today's marriages, the exact date of the feast could not be set because it all depended on the groom completing his lengthy preparations. So the bridesmaids in our story are waiting for the groom's arrival so they can process back to the banquet by torchlight with the bride-to-be. And I was wrong about the wise bridesmaids being mean when they refused to share their oil. If you consider that the Greek word for wise, phronimos, mainly means prudent, their behavior makes more sense, because they're practical enough to realize that sharing their oil with the foolish five risks all their torches going out halfway through the procession. It could be a long way to the bridegroom's new home. Better to have 5 lamps that make it all the way than to share the oil among 10 lamps and risk them all going dark halfway through the journey. Even so, I have to wonder, why send the foolish 5 out for oil right when they see the bridegroom has almost arrived? Why not be wise and compassionate and say, it's okay. There's enough light from these 5 lamps. We don't want you to miss out. After all, they made it over to the banquet hall anyway. The journey was successful with only half the illumination. I realize the message here today is alertness, keep awake, and not mercy. I know we're being set up at this time of year for the upcoming Advent season, when keep awake and prepare ye the way of the Lord are the dominant themes. But I can't shake the empathy I feel for these 5 women who always screw up, who are never ready, and whose punishment is to be denied the joys of heaven, left outside where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. William and I went to hear journalist and author Isabel Wilkerson speak last Thursday night. She wrote the seminal book, The Warmth of Other Suns, about the great migration of blacks to the North and West in the 20th century. She also wrote Caste, which delves deeper into the systems that keep all of humanity locked into hierarchies of oppression. In her talk, Wilkerson brought up the concept of radical empathy. Side note, the difference, in case you don't know, between sympathy and empathy is that sim means alongside, while em means inside. So, sympathetic to and empathetic with. End side note. Wilkerson insists that the only possible way forward for humanity that does not eventuate in its destruction is to practice a radical empathy for the other, for the person that is not you in any given conflict or situation. In other words, to have enough imagination to truly step into their experience and see the world through their eyes. Now, we can't even agree that killing children in classrooms is enough to warrant stricter gun laws. So to suggest something as self-effacing as radical empathy as even an option is, well, foolish. And yet, though it is all but impossible, the notion of radical empathy is something we need to keep in mind, to say out loud, so that we can't say no one ever mentioned it. So you might be wondering right about now how the preacher got from foolish bridesmaids with no lamp oil to the destruction of the human race. I'm not so sure myself. But it has something to do with radical empathy. I had a 45-minute phone call last week with a mother whose child has so many physical and emotional afflictions that she has lost her own sense of reality while caring for him. Listening to her story was difficult and left me feeling helpless, depressed, and even a bit ill for about 24 hours. But I know because she told me that it helped for her to express the pain of what she's going through. So we've scheduled another call in a month to check in. Now, as much as a gay man with no kids can, I think I was trying to engage in a form of radical empathy with this woman. And if I can do it, maybe you can too. The fate of the foolish bridesmaids pains me. It's ridiculous. They are characters in a parable, I know. But when I picture their frantic all-night search for oil, their race to the banquet hall, their rejection by the groom, the door slammed shut in their faces, I feel terrible. I think of all the people in our culture who are excluded from the banquet we get invited to every day. Some of them behave foolishly, Drug addicts steal. Homeless people leave a mess everywhere. And we don't want them to crash our party. But what would it look like to practice radical empathy in our hearts for them? Well, it would hurt us, but it might also help them. Radical empathy. Susan Caskey, a managing editor of The Week magazine, recently wrote about how the graphic images from Gaza and Israel were not having the desired effect of eliciting compassion. She noted, "I worry that these videos of the suffering in Israel and Gaza are not having the effect one would hope. They are not humanizing the other. Instead, many people seem to be focusing only on the horrors perpetrated against those they side with, ignoring the anguish on the other side. We all look at these images and mourn, but we are not mourning together." This is true. I have seen it. If you publicly express compassion for what Jews are going through in Israel, you are considered heartless for not witnessing to the 10,000 plus dead Palestinians and others being bombed into oblivion. If you publicly express compassion for the plight of Palestinians in Gaza or the West Bank, you risk being called anti-Semitic, or you are censured by Congress. A friend from Long Beach, someone I knew to be gentle and kind, posts angry messages on Facebook about how all his Christian friends have abandoned him because they won't outright support Israel's defending itself. He wrote yesterday, "I really need my friends who are not prone to Jewish generational trauma to tell me if you are not seeing genuine signs of a global second Holocaust." An Episcopal priest friend posts photos of dead Palestinian children and uses the word genocide to describe what Israel's doing. How will there ever be any semblance of radical empathy in this mess? I don't know. I only know that maybe it has to start a little bit with us. Maybe it starts with feeling sorry for 5 foolish young women with no oil in their lamps who have screwed up yet again. Maybe it starts with forgiving ourselves for all the late costumes, for all our own foolishness. Then with smiling at the homeless person who's annoying you. Then with praying for your friend's grandson who's in prison for drug use, and for the mother at her wit's end. Then with making a donation to a hospital in Gaza or Ukraine. Then emailing the synagogue or mosque to say they're in your prayers. I don't know how it will end, but probably in tears. Crying in radical empathy for the other, or tears at what has become of us. So I challenge you this coming Advent season to resist the wise who speak of their side being right, whose light is power or retaliation or violence, and to align yourself with the fools whose light, though dimming in this darkness in which we live, speaks of compassion and forgiveness and love. Foolish, foolish things. We may not make it to the banquet in time, but at least we'll have something to point to, proof that we tried, when the groom opens that door and demands to know why we didn't get it right.